On today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, we get into those YouTube comments, hearing from the viewers and listeners out there. Also, Lovie Smith and the Houston Texans scouting staff was at the Cincinnati Pro Day, had an opportunity to look at, among others, Sauce, Gardner, and we hear from Lovie Smith. We also end off the show with a little bit of more of Deshaun Watson and what he has going on and how the Houston Texans dodged the bullet. But first, Cody, go ahead and bring us in right.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to a Friday edition of the Locked On Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am John Hickman. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman for a lot of the back and forth, the engagement with the Texan fans and viewers and lovers out there. Also joined by none other than Cody Davis of Sports Illustrated. Make sure you follow him for all of the Texans updates, news, and check him out on SI Texans, the Sports Illustrated website. Cody, we have to talk about some very interesting comments from Twitter, from YouTube. But before we do that, the Houston Texans and Isaac Yiadom agreed to a 1-year deal. Former New York Giant, also played with Green Bay, and you guys should know a little bit about him. Last year, spent some time with Green Bay, played in 16 games, started in 1 the year before that in 2020. Appeared in 16 games and started in 10 of those games. I'm looking at some of his advanced stats. Last year, he gave up a total of 110 yards. I did mention he started in 1 game. The year before that, in New York, gave up 487 yards. And the year before that, for Denver, 482 yards. In the last 2 years, allowed 6 touchdowns, 3 in a 4-year career. 9 in his 4-year career so far. So Houston is bringing in another player on a 1-year deal where they could provide some depth to the cornerback position. And that's going to kind of foreshadow what we're going to talk about later in the show in terms of who Houston should bring in at number 3. Now, diving into the YouTube comments on the Larry Tunsil show, the Saving Face that came out earlier Thursday morning, we talked a little bit about free agency and what Houston should do, mentioned Marlon Mack and how I felt like Houston should be more active in free agency so far, because I'm not one of those guys that is just going to be okay with another losing season while covering this team. I'm not going to, we're going to have a losing season. And so I'm looking at some of the interesting comments, and I want to look at 2. The first is from Marshall. This is Marshall's first time that I've seen him comment on YouTube. If you've commented before, Marshall, sorry if I missed you. But he says, "I'm sorry, John, but you really do not understand how they're going about this rebuild. Bringing in free agents this year is not the play. They're not trying to win and make the playoffs this year." Cody, for me, that just speaks of giving the season away. That just speaks of a losing mentality, of laying down and looking towards the future instead of the opportunities that you have right now. And I think this fan base is broken right now. I think this fan base has been broken since they lost that 24-0 lead. That's why I think a lot of these fans want Malik Willis, because they remind him of that savior that they had at quarterback at Deshaun Watson, who left you on red. But it's okay if they have an opportunity to bring in some players, because I also want to address every day is Dre Day. It says he mentioned that we're building a team brick by brick. Even John doesn't seem to understand that. Oh, we didn't get no top free agents. It's not the time for that. I'm glad John Hickman is not the GM. We'd be right back in salary cap hell. Well, you know what? I like to address that as well every day is Dre Day, and thank you for commenting on YouTube. Shout out to you, man. Listen, they just freed up a bunch of cap space by moving on from Deshaun Watson. So if you guys are just sitting here and telling me in these YouTube comments that you are okay and conceding away a season again and not trying to be competitive because you want to save a little bit of money when you got over $100 million in cap space as of right now for next year, you don't want to at least spend some money on some of the tier 2 players? Then what does that say about where this fan base is right now? I think it's a joke.
I don't
go out there and make this roster competitive, for God's sakes.
I don't think the fan base or this organization is just giving the season away. But what I would say is this, John, and this is something that I talked about.
I just read that.
No. The most important thing for the Houston Texans right now as we enter phase 2 of this rebuild, the number one priority is to develop these young players, but that does not mean that they're not going to be competitive. And most importantly, and I'm going to repeat this, and I think this get lost in one side of the fan base wanting to go out and sign top 2 and top free agents, and the other side that's okay with saving money. The Houston Texans are still reaping the benefit of having a bad reputation around the league. Why would you they in order for them to get a top tier free agent or probably a top 2 tier free agent, they probably was going to have to overpay. And John, since you and I have been doing this podcast, overpaying players is something that you have been fond of for a long time. That irks your nerves for the longest. I'm okay with Nick Caserio, Lovie Smith, and the Texans building their foundation through the draft. And the guys that I'm hearing that the Texans are linked to going to these pro days, and we're going to get into 2 of them today, there's no way in hell the Texans are not going to be competitive in 2022. But it's all about developing young guys.
It's all an excuse for me.
But what I would say, yeah, we're a month away from the draft.
But we haven't drafted it for some people to say that we're not going to win this year, we're not making the playoffs, we're going to be a bad team. I think this fan base is really broken. And so, to the fan base out there, it's okay. It's okay to have some hope. And I think what's going on is you guys have hoped and dreamed and wished and wondered. And all of those merry thoughts have all came crushing down. Whether that had been 24-0 and how hype you were at your living room or at the bar, whether that had been drafting Deshaun Watson and watching Rick Smith go out there and make a ballsy trade to bring him into the franchise. And you're finally getting a savior after years of David Carrs and Matt Schaubs and TJ Yates. Whether that's just been watching DeAndre Hopkins in 2 years drop 2 passes. You see all that go away. And now you're broken. That's okay. A rebuild can happen by also bringing in at the very least, tier 2 players that can really make a difference for this franchise. I think Terrell Edmonds is also a free agent, the safety that had played for the Steelers. He's a player. I mean, you want to complain, Houston? We got nice weather, no sales tax, beautiful women, turkey leg hut. We got it all.
We got all that. But how many superstars actually wanted to stay in Houston?
I didn't name superstars. I have always named good players. Never named a superstar. Name Marlon Mack. Marlon Mack is a player that I think is a good player. Sonny Michel is a good player. Terrell Edmonds is a good player. Right? I've never named superstars.
Well, you're right, because I was going to use that argument. And, of course, talk about James and Carlos Correa and all these superstar guys that, left the organization. So you're right on that standpoint. But John, once again, given the foolishness that this organization has been through since going 24-0, they have a bad reputation. And I don't see the Texans paying the market value for a guy in order to come here. Because Sony Michel, Marlon Mack, all of those guys, they you will probably have to shell out just a little bit more money in order for them to consider coming here.
And before I
And
close
they're
out, I will
veterans. They're
say,
they're they're not holding on to the league. They're not holding on to the league to keep their career going by a string like a lot of these guys that Nick Casario
yeah,
signed
yeah.
last year.
And I'll tell you this: Marlon Mack would be lucky to get a contract from a team after his last 2 seasons. So if we're saying that, then we're saying we're okay with Rex Burkhead getting a lot of those carries next season because we're just going to lose anyway, right? Let's get that mindset out of here, Texas fans. It's a safe space. It's a safe space. Get it out. It's that time of year as college basketball tournament is finally upon us. March Madness, baby. And from all of the latest odds, the contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website or use your mobile device to learn more about all of the trends because BetOnline is where the game starts. Thanks for making Locked On Texans your first listen every day. Make sure you're following Locked On NFL. Locked On experts are covering the biggest stories around the NFL every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. Just enough time to gulp down a good athletic green juice. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, I think like most people, we in an ideal world, receivers are getting big and bigger. But if you can find a 6 feet corner that, that's faster than most people, that's pretty special. We put a big emphasis on ball skills. To me, the object of the defense is every snap is to score and take the ball away. We put a big emphasis on that, but we won't try to bring anyone in, add them to our mix if they don't like to tackle. We ask our corners to tackle. They have ball skills, and of course, but it still comes down to whether you can play man coverage a lot. That's a hard guy to find that I'm talking about. That's why it's good, too, to have Dino back in the system again, where we're all on the same page to be able to find those guys.
And apparently, it might not be too hard for the Houston Texans to find the ideal corner for Lovie Smith. What you just heard, Lovie Smith talked about his ideal for a cornerback during the NFL Combine on March 2nd. And John, that was important to play because on yesterday, the Houston Texans was among every team in the National Football League being a part of Cincinnati's Pro Day. Representing the Houston Texans was, of course, Coach Lovie Smith, offensive coordinator Pep Hamilton, and they did have one of their defensive back coaches. I'm not sure which one it was, but one of those guys were in attendance. And look, the Texans had their eyes set on one guy, and John, I know you're gonna love this. Your boy Sauce Gardner. And I was told by a source that the Houston Texans really like Gardner. They're extremely high on him. And it makes sense because when you go back and you take a listen to what Lovie Smith had to say about what he likes to see in a corner, a guy who is big, a guy who is speedy, a guy who isn't afraid to not only make plays on the ball, but also a guy who can tackle. That is basically what Gardner is. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, before moving on, and before, John, I definitely know you want to get into this, but I just want to give you guys some quick numbers. When you talk about Sauce Gardner and you talk about Lovie Smith's ideal cornerback, Gardner is a guy who's stands 6'2". He ran a 4.4 at his combine a couple weeks ago, and he ended his college season with 90 tackles, his college career, with 90 tackles, 9 interceptions, and as we all know, he did not give up a touchdown throughout his entire collegiate career at Cincinnati.
Yeah, and during the pro day for Cincinnati, teams were able to go out there and watch Ahmad Sauce Gardner, quarterback Desmond Ritter, Alec Pierce, a wide receiver, and edge rusher, Majay Sanders, who I think is a diamond in the rough. I like what Majay is able to do. Also, Kobe Bryant was, in attendance as well. Look at the smile right there on Kobe. Jerome Ford, running back, linebacker, Darian Beavers, safety, Brian Cooks, another safety, Javon Hicks, and defensive tackle, Curtis Brooks. And so this is a team that, when we look at the players that were out there at their positions, wide receiver, cornerback, running back, safety, defensive tackle, Houston had a lot of reasons to be out there and make sense for them, right? But if we're talking specifically at Ahmad, Sauce, Gardner, first of all, this is Sauce City, man. Shout out to Sauce Walker. He would fit perfectly in the city of Houston in terms of his nickname, right? But I look at him, Cody, as a player that, as you mentioned, man, no touchdowns given up in his collegiate career, and I think that is where you have to start, right? When you look at college, when you look at the explosiveness on offense, what comes with the collegiate level of football, it's all about big plays, finding zones, and a lot of times cornerbacks getting beat, right? And so he's a player that you start right there. No touchdown given up in his 4-year career, 3-4-year career. And the one thing that I love about Gardner, talked about this the other day on the NFL show with Ryan Tracy and Eric Crocker, also John Harris of the Houston Texans. He was also on there with us. We were talking, and we both love Sauce Gardner at 3 because of 2 reasons. He can play zone, and he can play man, right? And when we look at great corners coming out of college, it seems like that they're very good at one, and then they lack the ability at the other at times, right? When you get a cornerback that can do both very well, and his ball skills are great as well. So I look at a cornerback in Sauce Gardner where we are going back and forth on whether or not Houston should bring in another player at that cornerback position, which they did on Thursday. They brought in, Isaac. Right, they brought in Isaac Yidam. Sorry, but they did bring him in on a 1-year deal. But Sauce Gardner, I think, is a player that he can be a staple piece for your secondary, right? And then we also look at other players that were at the pro day for Cincinnati. We look at a Kobe Bryant, which is also, I think, is another good cornerback that they featured. Kobe Bryant was one of those players that, there were times in games Gardner was not targeted, and so Bryant may have been the more targeted corner, and he held his own. There's some things that I think he can get better at. We talked about this earlier in the year after I visited the Senior Bowl, but he's also a good player. Then we look at Majay Sanders. I think he's very athletic. He's long. And I do think he needs to add some meat to his bones, right? He needs to get a little bit bigger. He does have a slimmer frame, but he's also a very good player. And Jerome Ford is a player that I also look out, that Houston is out there, that I can see Houston, looking at their pro day as a player they may want to add to this roster to bring some youth on a fairly good contract for you salary cap lovers, in this roster, right? So, but overall, if we're looking specifically at what Lovie Smith mentioned, the new age wide receivers and how you need a bigger cornerback that can run with them and, do a multitude of things on a football field. Guys, why not Sauce Gardner at number 3?
John, I want to ask you this question. When you take a look at Sauce Gardner, I'm big on him too. You already know the Houston Texans got the number 3 pick. They're already, because of the trade, they got the number 13 pick as well. And by the way, we're going to talk about what they probably going to do at pick number 13 a little bit later on in the show. But when I take a look at Sauce Gardner, do you not get a little bit not excited knowing that he is coming from he's coming from a conference where the talent level isn't really that good in the American Athletic Conference versus when you compare another guy who is ranked, if not just as high as Sauce Gardner in Derek Stingley from LSU, a guy who is coming from the SEC. I understand that Gardner had the better collegiate career, but to me, Stingley, who is rated just as high, he played against better competition. Do that kind of plays with your mind, or you just take a look at Sauce Gardner and say it doesn't matter what conference he's in, this young man can actually ball and change this organization.
No, and for everybody that has those questions or had those questions, go watch the tape against Alabama. Right? Go watch that Alabama tape. And the thing about watching that tape is you go into that game, I saw the tweets where it was a sense of, oh, now they about to play Bama.
Mm-hmm.
And he, as a player, held his own. There were times where they wasn't targeting him, right? He was still just kind of clean out there. And then I saw him willingly come up, get in the dirt, make a tackle, right? And so, no, the conference, that doesn't bother me whatsoever. This is a team that drafted a quarterback with 11 starts, and we're rooting for him, right? So none of that matters. As long as you're able to actually play some football and play it well, that's all that matters. Have you tried some of the Built Bar Puffs? If you haven't, man, the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy. They're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar. They are a treat. And they're covered in 100% real chocolate. What am I talking about? Y'all already know I'm talking about Built Bar. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors like the yummy cinnamon churro, coconut, marshmallow, banana, cream pie. All of these flavors are so good. My mom actually loves them. Shout out to Mama, right? Mama knows best. And they're going to be your favorite as well. The best thing about them, low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bars with these. They're better. And a typical candy bar can, carry between 200 to 300 calories. We want to stay away from those. We want to deal with Built Bar that covers around 130 calories. Only 4 grams of sugar, only 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Can't beat that. Go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. Thanks for making the Locked On Texans your first listen every day. Make sure you're checking us out for next week. Make sure your second listen is Locked On NFL Draft with Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker. They bring the NFL draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts.
And before we close out this Friday installment of Locked On Texans, as you guys know in the last segment, we talked about Ahmad Sauce Gardner. The Houston Texans are extremely high on him. They was at Cincinnati's Pro Day on Thursday, but before they had to travel to Cincinnati, the Houston Texans were at Ohio State Pro Day on Wednesday, and they had their eyes set on 2 wide receivers, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. Now, John, listeners and viewers, I think we can all agree that if Davis Mills is going to be your starting quarterback and you want to give him an opportunity to succeed, you want to see this offense get better than where it was last year, I think we all can agree that you should go out and get one of the top wide receivers at pick number 13. And I am actually a little bit excited about the news that the Texans actually had their eyes set on Chris Olave, because as you guys know, during our pre-free agency mock draft, he was a guy that actually had the Texans taken in the second round. And the only reason why, I don't know what mock draft website I was on, but they had Chris Olave in the second round. I know that's not realistic, but I am happy to know that this is a guy whose stock has risen drastically over the last couple of weeks, mainly soared since the NFL Combine earlier this month. This is a guy that can actually help the Houston Texans stretch the field, and I'm pointing that out because, as you know, early on in the week when we had an opportunity to talk to Big Sarge, he said that is the type of wide receiver he would like to see the Houston Texans go out to get at his NFL Combine. He ran a 4.3. This is a guy who recorded 936 yards on 65 catches, 13 touchdowns. And if they don't have an opportunity to get Chris, Garrett Wilson is another guy I think that might be have a little bit more upside than Olave. This is a guy last season who recorded 1,058 yards on 70 catches along with 12 touchdowns. John, if I'm the Houston Texans at pick number 13, I think it's a toss-up because I think both of these guys can really help the Houston Texans moving forward.
Well, I don't think it's a toss-up. If Olave is available, I'm going with Olave. If number 13 is the pick you choose to address the wide receiver position, and yes, listen, one thing that I believe about Olave is, and Eric Crocker, who does the NFL draft show, he called Olave a speedster technician guy. Like he has that blow the top off speed, but he's also so much of a technician that you can't get caught up. And as my boy Phil will call him, a one trick pony. He's not that. He's able to do a lot of different things at that wide receiver position, run the route tree pretty well as well. So yeah, I think that Olave is a guy that we look at his career at Ohio State for the Buckeyes. You know, he produced since he got the opportunity to play football. And if you are wanting to address the wide receiver position, I think Olave for Davis Mills. Think about that. Think about that. Think about Davis. Davis Mills to Olave, a bomb. You know, a 50-yard bomb. Because when you run a 4.3, that's what you can do.
And not only that, John, I just think for the Texans, like I mentioned, both of these guys, the Texans need. And that's why I say it's a toss-up. I understand Olave might be the guy that everyone likes, but I also like Garrett as well. I think he's more so the physical receiver that can win those one-on-one battles. But I think the Texans at number 13, if they go their route to get a wide receiver, especially to help this offense, I think it's a win-win situation for the Houston Texans. But just wanted to point this out for today's show to let you guys know that the Houston Texans are definitely building through the draft, John. I'm sorry. I know you hate that, but that does not mean they're not going to be competitive this year.
I don't hate that. Building through the draft is the right thing to do when you partner it with bringing in free agents that also make sense, right? The Texans signed Dare Obuwale as running back for a 2-year deal. Now, you can look at that and say, okay, well, we're going to build through the draft and get a running back as well. Well, I mean, Dare, like, that wasn't necessarily a good signing when you had other opportunities out there to make. So don't be cheap. That's all I'm saying. Cody, what's going on with Deshaun Watson? The last time we heard from Deshaun Watson was this. What was it with Deshaun?
I mean, we just need a whole culture shift. We just need new energy. We need discipline. We need structure. We need a follower or a leader so we can follow that leader as players. And that's what we need. And, you know, we got to have, you know, the love of just not just the game of football, because that's what we do, but the love for people and the people in this organization. We all got to be on the same page. There's too many different minds and too many different ideas and too many people thinking that they have this power, and it's not like that. You know, we need someone that stand tall, and this is who we following. This is the way it go. Like I said yesterday after the game, and we're going to do it this way to win.
The last time everyone heard from Deshaun Watson was on January 5th, 2021, a day after the 2020 season came to an end, that basically marked the end of Deshaun Watson's career with the Houston Texans. Why is that important? Because later on today, we are expecting the Cleveland Browns to introduce Deshaun Watson as their new quarterback. And John, we all know everything that has happened since Watson made those statements, and this is going to be a very interesting press conference later on today, unless Cleveland decides to, you know, just introduce him differently and just don't do a press conference or whatever the case might be. On yesterday, he did pass his physical, which means the deal between the Texans and the Cleveland Browns is 100% complete. And yeah, we should be hearing from Deshaun Watson later today.
They Cody, and you can attest to this more than I can, but it's been a while since I have been able to really be in a press conference. Well, press conferences during the Senior Bowl week and things like that. But as journalists, he has to be introduced. Can't skip around that. And as journalists, I would love to see real questions asked, no punches pulled. Um, However, people do have a job they need to keep, provide for families, and so we don't know what the Browns organization may have in store for reporters, but there's no way around them pulling him out and just announcing it on Twitter or something like that. A real
Well,
press conference needs to be, should be, and will be held.
yeah, hopefully, and I say unless they change their mind, because I think the only way they can possibly get around is the fact that all 22 of these lawsuits are still ongoing. And maybe they'll probably use that to like get him away from talking to the media. I don't know, but yesterday was a sad scene. The Cleveland Browns was kind of like sneaking him inside the facility. And did you get an opportunity to see that on social media? And it just looks sad. Like I just sat there looking at the video. It and they like snuck him through the back. He was at the facility, and it's just. But
It is what it is. Shout out to Baker Mayfield getting some workouts in Austin. I think
along with Danny Amendola.
Danny Amendola, Jr., Danny Amendola, and another receiver too. So Baker's trying to make sure he's.
Cole Beasley was the other receiver.
Cole Beasley. Cole Beasley is a player that I wouldn't mind. I know he's of age, but Cole Beasley is one of the best slot receivers in the game. I wouldn't mind Houston reaching out and trying to work out a team-friendly deal that could help out Davis Mills from that slot position. Thank you guys for checking out the Locked On Texans podcast for another week. I'm John _Hickman 12 is where you can follow me. Y'all know me as John, some sports guy Hickman. Follow me on Twitter for Texans updates. I retweet them. I interact. All of the fan favorite talk. Follow me on Twitter for that so we can have some fun. And make sure you follow the Locked On Texans Twitter page and continuously subscribe, comment, challenge us on YouTube at Locked On Texans Podcast.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at Cody Davis _24. Once again, that's Cody COTY DAVIS _24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I know you guys really wanted to hear from Brandon, but because we are expecting Deshaun Watson to speak in Cleveland later on today, we decided to just hold Brandon to next week to give you guys a different perspective about his departure from Houston. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.